This tutorial is more on the principles behind lip syncing animation. If you don't know the mechanics yet behind lip syncing, you can check out part 1 of this tutorial series here. Now time to get more into principles behind lip syncing. The best thing to do when lip syncing is to always keep it simple. You don't have to use every single mouth position that's available, and you don't have to make everything a smooth transition. This also means not lip syncing everything in ones either. Lip syncing will often look best when it has various timings. Additionally, jumping or skipping in-betweens for lip syncing winds up making the different pronunciations look a lot more deliberate. As a sort of ad hoc rule of thumb, snap open, ease closed. You can see on the left I've tried to lip sync every single frame and it just looks like a mess.
Where do you think you're going?
On the right, however, I've done it mostly in 2s, varying to 3s and 4s here and there, and sometimes putting in pauses, and it looks significantly better. The big reason for this is that it makes your lip syncing look a lot more deliberate. As far as excessive mouth shapes goes, remember that Eastern animation will often get by with just 3 mouth shapes. The core few mouth shapes I mentioned in the previous tutorial should be what most of your lip syncing utilizes. Any other shape should be for specific emphasis, and shouldn't be super common. Many specialized sounds can just be substituted with one of the core shapes.
Where do you think you're going?
On the right, you can see that I substituted in some of the more complex sounds with just one of the core shapes. Honestly, on this note, one of the worst offenders that I often see is the TH sound. It usually involves a mouth shape with the tongue sticking out. I see a lot of animators, especially newer ones, using this shape extensively as if your tongue would regularly stick out of your mouth whenever you're talking. It just doesn't look good in most cases, and it's not realistic at all. Lines often won't be spoken slow and deliberately, so you won't have a chance to lip sync every single syllable. Don't do the bad example that I gave prior, trying to lip sync every single syllable. Just be efficient. Here's an example of the faster version of the same line.
Where do you think you're going?
Notice how, instead of keeping the same number of frames, that I just simply cut down my usage overall. While a lot of frames got cut out in the faster example, it's all still totally readable, and you can read the lips very easily in both cases. So to summarize, fewer, more deliberate frames means less work for you, more emphasis on what you're lip syncing, and overall a more polished result. Now, one thing that it kind of gets glossed over is where you do your lip syncing. In Flash, things are basically done via symbols. When you're using a rigged character, you usually want to have the mouth inside the head as a nested object. This will keep the mouth in place as the head moves around, so you don't have to move the mouth around as you're syncing it. The head in either case needs to be set to playback or loop. I'd recommend duplicating the head for every new lip sync. Option A is to just import the audio into the head and lip sync it there. Option B is to just lip sync the mouth on the main timeline and then import it into the head. So, lip syncing internally, which I'm going to call option A, is a lot easier to think about and is a lot easier to set up, but also requires a bit more setup in some cases. As usual, you're probably going to want to make sure that your head is named something different than your stock head. All you basically do is you take the audio file from the main timeline and import it into the head itself. Then you just have to lip sync the audio and the mouth inside the head using the audio as it plays back. The hard part is making sure that the audio lines up inside the head's timeline as it does with the main timeline. This gets exceptionally more complicated if the head comes into play after the audio's already started. It's a lot easier if the audio comes into play after the head's already on the stage, such as in this example that I'm working with here. It's fairly straightforward. You drop the audio inside the head, you lip sync it out, and then you're good to go. You just need to make sure that the head itself is set to play once or loop on the main timeline.
What in the f***? That's not suspicious or anything.
Option B involves copying your mouth symbol to the main timeline and syncing it to your main timeline's audio. This has the advantage of not requiring you to slice up your audio at all. This is a little bit harder to think about conceptually, but personally it's the method I prefer a little bit more. When copying the mouth to the main timeline, it can be helpful to remove all the transformations just for ease of access later. When you're done syncing your mouth, copy all the frames specifically that you just synced with Ctrl-Alt-C. Then make a new symbol using Ctrl-F8 and paste these frames using Ctrl-Alt-V into the timeline of this new symbol. This will create a nested lip-synced mouth. Similar to how you have a lip-synced head in the previous example A, this is a single mouth that will play the entire lip sync as a single object. If you zeroed out any transformations before starting, you can even just go in and swap the symbols of the stock mouth that you have in your head with the one that you've just made. Otherwise, you can drag and drop it in and position it where it needs to go. Option B may sound like it's more steps, but the lack of the need to slice and import the audio into the head makes it actually about the same difficulty, if not even a bit easier. The other advantage is that this keeps the mouth as a single object, which means you can move it around, such as if you're moving the facial expressions and the facial components around for like a head turn.
What in the f***? That's not suspicious or anything.
If you're doing hand-drawn animation with pre-rendered mouths, which sometimes is the case, option A is usually going to be a better way to go, but both A and B seem to be equally effective for rigged animation from my experience. Just do whatever's more convenient for you. So yeah, that's the simplest way that I can basically describe the principles behind lip syncing. As I said, lip syncing is relatively easy to do, but it's something that takes a bit to master. If you haven't seen part 1 of this tutorial, you can check that here, or you can also check some of the other tutorials that I've made for Flash here. And because I'm a shilling little whore, if you want, you can support me on my Patreon as well. I draw a lot of robots with boobs.